Addendum. The non-hereditary genetic spread details in humans. Restored to the old normal of a century ago on Earth in 2022. Specifically referencing the particular category somnambulist, which has always been a natural normal part of the spread details and always will be. This is the stock standard fascinating futuristic sounding document that is usually automatically viewed as the orthogon whacko stuff that could be used to cast fake doubt on the rest thing. It is regarding somnambulist genes in humans, to be more specific. Factoring in the human equivalent species that evolved in a different star system that was hiding in the atmosphere of Saturn for around 900 years until destroyed in late 2022. The intruder extrasolar species' little bit of evil trickery to introduce the false concept of God that can change the natural path of evolution becomes clear. Even if it is the weirdest sounding thing going around. Suspend your reflex pantomime-inspired rejection and take it in as theory. Believe it if you're sensible. As mentioned in the gender, sexuality, and spread details chapter. The genetic spread of natural normal non-hereditary bits, albino, big-statured, short-statured, somnambulist, etc., is counted by gene in each chromosome of 2 in living conceptions. From one cell zygote to oldest person alive in humans. Each living DNA strand in each zygote can have a maximum of 2 counting chromosomes for each category. The total count includes every chromosome in our star system, by species or group category species, the same as every individual star system. The species that arrived from elsewhere in the galaxy around 900 years ago, that was hiding in the atmosphere of Saturn until destroyed in late 2022, was included in the count of those details in our star system as a human equivalent species. Part of the count with us humans automatically when they entered our star system and parked in Saturn. Fairly simple. Ordinarily they would have had the approximate same spread percentages in their living conceptions whilst hiding in Saturn, obviously. But they developed a way to DNA test sperm and ova to detect if the chromosome in each one had a somnambulist gene in it. Then focused on conceiving as many living conceptions with a somnambulist gene as they could, letting them live as long as possible without being gestated. For example, fading out in a nutrient solution medium whilst creating more in a cycle. Always having tens of millions of living somnambulist gene embryos at any one time. They dumped any that didn't get fully gestated and then only gestated double somnambulist embryos to birth, where possible. Constantly gestating and giving birth to only double somnambulist conceptions, where possible. That caused the number of conceptions on Earth with 1 or 2 somnambulist genes in them to drop as they started to do it. Causing an aggravating and annoying anomaly in the number of somnambulist conceptions on Earth compared to all the other categories. And in humans and microorganisms only, not the animals in between. They used that to introduce the hideously evil false concept of a god or a magic spell that can change the natural normal path of evolution to try to introduce the idea of a superior species being who could control the numbers and make them change. Then used it to get people to pretend evil experimentation could cause the numbers to change in other categories, too. With possible human extinction and theft of our planet and star system in mind. Possibly. Or just planning to steal everything useful left behind if we came to our extinction demise. All the while treacherously advising people on Earth to victimize and harass somnambulist gene people as if something was wrong with the numbers that had wider implications. They would have needed to collect, store, and transport to Saturn as many somnambulist gene ova as they could get their hands on to do it. Some gruesome planet-wide donation thing. All adult females on fertility drugs, having their ova harvested once a month. Prizes for females who ended up donating somnambulist gene ova per ova. Huge storage areas with them on ice. Game show awful. The concept that objects in our solar system, that formed in another and were moved here have large frozen piles of ova or sperm in them somewhere is different, certainly. Europa, Titan, and Triton. So, for somewhere up to 900 years, approximately, it has been incessantly annoying. Think this typical approximate quote from people who incorrectly argued somnambulist was possibly debatable as natural in some way and one of my Romanov family coats of arms. A family with limited members for centuries that has consistently had a somnambulist gene person around almost always, if not always. Well, we're not saying that somnambulist is unnatural or not normal or anything for certain because of the animals' numbers being normal. But the number of somnambulists humans on Earth just seems a little lower than the other categories are, like albino and pattern bald. And well, with that being the case in humans, it's just a little weird and makes you think maybe. The worst fake theory on why they were a little lower was that, quote, maybe somnambulist was evolving out of our species and some somnambulist gene humans got left behind to be more like an animal than human because the animals still have it. More like a Neanderthal than people without the somnambulist gene. Of course, people with a natural kinky sexual attraction to somnambulists were the first ones to get seriously angry about it that weren't somnambulist. And I mean seriously angry. The number of somnambulist chromosomes in living conceptions in humans in our star system, the solar system, has gone back to the old normal on Earth, with only humans counting like all the other categories since that species hiding in Saturn was destroyed in self-defense of our star system in 2022. There was a large burst of new somnambulist children born in 2023, back to human-only births in our star system, making the numbers up to the old normal, and it is extremely exciting in some ways. So really exciting people are having difficulty getting enough sleep. I'm ready to party. So are plenty of others with that resentful somewhere around the 900 years of vengeful bitterness still there. It will fade, for sure. Back to the old normal like the other categories. It also caused the weird quote, somnambulist gene people and animals seem to be sort of aware of them in some way, the intruding aliens, via being able to communicate via the common somnambulist gene DNA. I am double somnambulist by the way. There was always the genetic communication connection between somnambulists on Earth and their species hiding in Saturn, as they were all double somnambulists. They were claiming to be a superior being to humans, introducing the false concept of evolution changing God with their little bit of genetic trickery. Also, traitors to their own double somnambulist genes by telling people to constantly speculate about and victimize somnambulist humans on Earth as if weird, inferior, or obsolete evolutionary leftovers, whilst claiming to be a superior being in our solar system that were all double somnambulist themselves. It's the end of several so-called terrorist fake doctrine and terrorism groups as well. Things like the bizarrely mislabeled heinous concept of ethnic cleansing was the extended heinous intellectual vomit produced and attempted to be passed off as an experiment to see if the numbers in other categories could be manipulated. Like somnambulists just seemed a little lower in humans than others, lunatics trying to cast fake spells via torture and murder to attempt to gain the non-existent power to manipulate the numbers in other categories themselves. Horrible. How did that crap end up with people pretending they could make everyone bisexual? That just leaves minor discrepancies in very small organisms on Earth caused by the equivalent organism living and evolving on Titan, which was moved to our star system and did not form in the solar system, along with Europa and Triton. They are fine, those microorganisms on Titan. They are not attempting to breed only one category and everything, so they should have the usual spread in themselves with Earth and the rest of our star system factored in. Any discrepancy on Earth caused by them will be temporary and not permanent, constantly morphing with real-time changes in microorganisms only. The percentages of those spread details, with all except the category none of them at all being caused by para-hydrogen in the universe, count in the total in our star system, species category by species category. The category none of them is caused by ortho-hydrogen, obviously. Not superior or inferior, either. Like amoeba, if applicable. If there are amoeba in Titan, the genetic details count with amoeba on Earth, for the total in our star system. That concept is important to reference for the idea of humans and animals becoming multiplanetary in our own star system. They can't harm us in any way. There are microscopic organisms living in Titan for certain. In the cryovolcano warm spots clearly visible in orbital probe data that are caused by the Saturn polar wobble stretch squeeze effect heating. They may cause minuscule anomalies in amoeba genetic detail numbers on Earth, for example, but can't do us any harm. They are amoeba. People who trained themselves to monitor genetic somnambulist spread numbers on Earth, who immediately went for the peering brain at the somnambulist humans when looking for anomalies compared to other categories, don't get that anomaly to count anymore, and immediately get diverted to microscopic morphing anomalies in microorganisms instead. The genetic spread details in our star system were actually totally normal the whole time that species was in our star system, until 2022, but their bit of genetic trickery caused the numbers on Earth to seem slightly a little lower in total somnambulists than the other categories. In short, as a bizarre flow-on effect of assuming incorrectly. The lunatics intellectually diverted by the anomaly in total somnambulist genes in humans on Earth, caused by the species from elsewhere in the galaxy that was hiding in Saturn's little bit of trickery until late 2022, led to lunatics on Earth deciding to illegally withhold inheritance assets from as many somnambulist gene beneficiaries as possible. Illegally withhold inheritance estates from beneficiaries who inherited assets via a previous owner who was a somnambulist gene person. Illegally withhold inheritance estates from beneficiaries who inherited off a previous owner who had a somnambulist gene ancestor within a set number of generations. Pretend the situation, as it was the excuse for evil experimentation on other categories, like albino, and somnambulist had to unfairly take the blame. As another, possibly hypothetical, example, the Titanic incident may have been an attempt to fill the vessel with as many wealthy somnambulist gene people as possible to then pass on the inheritances after the mass murder to non-somnambulist beneficiaries only. Including stealing the identities of any somnambulist gene beneficiaries after their relatives or friends were booked for the trip. My great-grandfather Prince Sebastian Habsburg, the last Habsburg prince, was naturally a somnambulist gene person. He captained the maiden voyage of the Titanic under the pseudonym Ed Smith. If that is a typical theoretical organized crime-themed example, a Titanic full of wealthy somnambulists, then they were pretending the assets were sort of going to people with a detail that may have been reverse evolving out of humans, but not animals, that are therefore between a human and an animal. More like, say, a modern Neanderthal in some way, with obsolete or out-of-date genetic details. That they could do anything they wanted, no matter how heinously evil, until somnambulist genes disappeared from the human genome. The possible scenarios for World War I and II need to be kept in mind there. There have been people around for nearly a century who incorrectly assumed a mass genocide of all living somnambulist humans would result in there being no more in the human genome. So wrong. So, they tried to pass on the assets illegally early to non-somnambulist beneficiaries via a mass murder, or steal them, so they didn't go to a person they were pretending was considered to be possibly between a human and an animal in some way. Somnambulist does not mean subhuman, missing link, more towards an animal than full human, or completely off the chart compared to non-somnambulists and the animals who are somnambulists, as if some weird genetic resonance. Restore order and hand the inheritance assets over to the owners, like me, now. The other thing to factor in is lunatics pretending they personally have had some intergenerational magic powers over somnambulists, whilst there were anomalies in the total human numbers on Earth, whilst the species was hiding and living in Saturn's atmosphere until late 2022. They are lunatics who sit around staring at natural somnambulist gene people, pretending the focus of the staring is about to respond like a puppet when never told to. As if the stare alone, and all the intergenerational theories, made of lies, and their implications, back up to 900 years, is enough to make a somnambulist gene person that puppet for them, just with a persistent stare and residual self-deprecation. They stare, blink, smirk, get violent, and wait. They will take a while to break down to reality, but it will happen. Partying, or vengeful revenge motivated by residual bitterness racked up for over half a millennium, is upon you. It must have been stressful and weird, for everyone, when the species hiding in Saturn settled enough to start conceiving millions of somnambulist gene embryos and only gestating double somnambulist babies to cause the anomaly in the spread details count on Earth to work it for evil from there. The reverse has just happened, starting late 2022. The somnambulist gene spread count in humans is back to humans only. Back to the old normal of around a millennium ago. Party, anyone. The only way to make it appear there would be an anomaly in the somnambulist gene count in humans again would be to recruit a species that evolved in a different star system, get them to move to our solar system, hide in it, and do the same thing as the destroyed species. I'm not advocating for that. As a final note, ritualistically or repeatedly abusing natural somnambulist gene people because the vile evil extrasolar intruders that were hiding in Saturn's atmosphere for around 900 years were all double somnambulist gene human equivalents, pretending to be a superior being to humans was never acceptable. It isn't acceptable now they are gone either, or at any time in the future. The make somnambulist gene people gasp as if suddenly hysterically overexcited, then become suddenly forlorn like a very upset or distraught child thing. Here goes. This document could be some group's personal end of all things. It is difficult to explain, but simple. Their species always pumped out at least millions of somnambulist gene embryos that were no other para-hydrogen category via some type of scanner and let the single somnambulist gene ones grow in a medium until they couldn't anymore. Constantly pumping out more with a hypothetical 10 million embryos at any one time as the specification. Then only gestated double somnambulist children that were no other category, obviously. That caused the percentages of somnambulist gene zygotes on Earth to decrease slightly as the intruder species numbers were counted with humans as the total in our star system. Not anymore. Party. So, other people and others on Earth were told to victimize somnambulist gene people on Earth. Make like somnambulist genes were in the process of disappearing over time. Reverse evolving out of humans. Nothing reverse evolves, it is an oxymoron. I mentioned that their species that was living inside Saturn were all double somnambulist gene human equivalents. Their treacherous advice to abuse and victimize somnambulist gene people on Earth was what caused that weird. Breathe in. Hunch over. And make a garbled, strangled, screeching noise of exasperation thing. 2, by the way. People doing it on Earth, impersonating their species hiding in Saturn, self-loathing at being double somnambulist, and advising non-somnambulists on Earth to victimize somnambulist humans and animals became a phenomenon in the last 900 years. That's that toy-drinking bird of frustration and self-loathing impersonation thing explained too. The equipment they scanned the reproductive cells and prepared the conceptions with. If the scanning and conceiving machinery in their habitat vehicle structures in Saturn's atmosphere broke down for a few hours, the one that only conceived single somnambulist gene conceptions of no other category, then the number of living somnambulist conceptions they had on hand dropped from the theoretical 10 million at a time to lower. Whenever it did, they told lunatics on Earth taking advice from them, including as if they were God, to try to make somnambulist humans and relevant others on Earth suddenly gasp in hysterical excitement, physically erect, with widened eyes, as if assuming that the number of somnambulist human conceptions might be going back to normal. Because theoretically, it would happen very suddenly. And that somnambulist humans would not look like UN evolving freaks anymore. Then when their machinery started up again in Saturn, and the number of somnambulist gene conceptions they had on hand went back up to the stock standard number, which made them drop for humans on Earth to the explainable anomaly status, they told those lunatics to make somnambulist humans all impersonate a devastated child with a hunch over, dangling arms, and that intensely aggravating upset, noise thing. Constantly over anything at all. Robotic even. It became so annoying they started doing it full-time, combining it with the false somnambulist gene humans are puppets because of the anomaly in spread numbers amongst somnambulists thing. It self-perpetuated it, leaving a bunch of lunatics pretending to have magic powers to make somnambulist humans gasp in excitement, wide-eyed and physically erect, then slump over all dangly and impersonate a devastated child with that thing constantly. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When no somnambulists on Earth actually did it like a puppet on cue when told, they started trying to cause it in other ways so they could pretend it was caused by the temporary breakdowns in the machinery in Saturn thing. Sports corruption wall-to-wall, for example. The really awesome good news is that when they were destroyed in late 2022, around late November, the turn of December, the number of human somnambulist conceptions in our star system, on Earth in particular, went back to normal very suddenly. Then there were a huge number of natural somnambulist children born in 2023. Back to the old normal of a century ago, that always was the norm, back to the beginnings of life itself in our star system. They haven't conceived any somnambulist gene zygotes in Saturn at all since their destruction in late 2022. People who went into that gasp wide-eyed erect, then slumped dangly like devastated child thing, just started doing it repeatedly, as if thinking that the conception machinery in Saturn broke down, and doing it as if waiting for the machinery to kick back into gear, and get up to that stock standard number there again. But it never restarted. Sports corruption, and its myriad of commensurate fake punishments for not behaving like a puppet when told was the obvious one. Has there been an extra burst of corruption since their machinery broke down permanently in our star system in 2022, crushed to bits in Saturn's atmosphere? Yes, obviously. Doping. Match-fixing, cosmetic surgery lookalikes, match-fixing, poisonings, infections, match-fixing, too many players on the field for one team, match-fixing. Anything goes. No thanks. I mentioned earlier that the embryos they let develop for as long as they could, to the point where they faded out because of no attempt to fully gestate them, were all single somnambulist gene conceptions of no other para-hydrogen category. There is one category other than para-gene category for the non-hereditary genetic spread details. It is none of the above, or none of them. Being none of the para-hydrogen gene categories is natural and normal, and therefore caused by orthohydrogen, by extrapolated implication. Given that none of them orthohydrogen category is basically the same set percentage of living conceptions, there was another consequence. There was a similar anomaly in the number of none of the above conceptions in humans as well, that exactly coincided with the anomaly in somnambulist conceptions, but was ever so slightly smaller due to their species only gestating double somnambulist embryos to birth. They didn't gestate double none of them embryos. Single somnambulist, single none of them were in equal numbers, then only double somnambulist babies, but none of them babies. So, everything I have mentioned here regarding somnambulist living conception in our star system when they existed within it, until late 2022, also applies to none of them conceptions. They are not more like Neanderthals on the way to disappearing, or like Encino people, either. None of the above, none of the para-hydrogen categories conceptions in humans, has gone back to the old normal as well, immediately the species in Saturn was destroyed in late 2022. I am not none of the above, so I can't share experiences firsthand as if one. I'm assuming it was basically the same stuff, but with a twist due to the ever so slightly lower anomaly thing, compared to living somnambulist conceptions. Perhaps they are in a similar mindset to somnambulists. Relieved, excited, and ready, and with that 900 years or so of vengeful business thing, ready to go, as well. Maybe they want to party, too. When there was an explainable anomaly in the numbers of somnambulist gene conceptions in humans, whilst there was that intruder species living in Saturn until late 2022, another category did not increase above normal, as if to compensate for the anomaly caused by the slightly lower numbers of living somnambulist conceptions. The concept that one of the other categories can increase above normal to fill the void is blatantly incorrect and covered completely in the rest of this information. Taken to the extreme, people who lied and said another category was going up to compensate to above the rest categories where there was no anomaly were basically pretending that somnambulist was disappearing and a different category was doubling. Complete rubbish. That stupidity does not result in anything that belongs to a somnambulist being the future property of people of that other category by theft. Or whatever other category they were lying about having new majority rule over the rest. If people pretend one category increase to anomaly above normal status to fill void, it does not mean they get to fill their own metaphorical void by stealing assets off somnambulists. They do not have power of veto or magic control over anything to make themselves go up when another category goes down. No categories go up to above normal set percentages in each star system at any time, under any circumstances. I could describe it as like a music equalizer readout. One readout for Earth only and one for the rest of the solar system. When there are only living conceptions on Earth, the displayed percentage for each para-hydrogen category and the one ortho-hydrogen only category, none of them, is flat across the readout for Earth only at the same percentage, totaling 100%. The rest of the solar system readout is blank, all nothing. If living conceptions in the human equivalent or another species category happen in the Saturn system using the destroyed intruders double somnambulist conceptions to birth and every other living conception that didn't get gestated to birth and faded out one somnambulist gene chromosome with no other para-categories and a none of them for the other chromosome, then the readout for somnambulist gene living conceptions on Earth drops slightly more than the none of the above category. The rest of the solar system readout has somnambulist gene conceptions on it, which is slightly larger than the new none of the above living conceptions readout. If you add the Earth readout to the rest of the solar system readout, you get flat all the same in our star system again, totaling 100%. When that intruding species was in our star system for around 900 years, their living conceptions counted on the rest of the solar system readout. That now only applies to microorganisms elsewhere in our solar system, excluding the odd person here and they're sent into space and stuff like that. End of non-whacko document. Warning, don't send someone to take me away. An extremely important upside of all this in hypno-techno star system talk. If a species that moved from elsewhere in the galaxy could live inside Saturn's atmosphere for around 900 years, then us humans can, too. Obviously, it would involve channeling static electricity discharging from the atmosphere of Saturn to its core, like lightning through lightning conduit rods, to be able to plug in and run the electrical equipment required. Theoretically, that would be a fluctuating amount of static discharge between two measurable extremes, that is weaker in the upper atmosphere and constantly between those extremes. As a species, we wouldn't have to hide in it though, so dangling something in that redirects static discharge to a vehicle outside its atmosphere would work, as long as the excess flowed back again. Then a nice moon for some stuff, like water spraying out and forming rings, if it is drinkable. Sounds better by the sentence. Sources of water then now. Enceladus, for example. We as humans could also try the living in Saturn's atmosphere theory at Venus. Possibly Jupiter. Although as we all know from the end of all things hitting Jupiter in 1993, it gets hit a lot. A moon of Jupiter is a better base scenario for me. Io constantly discharges static electricity to the outside of Jupiter. Warm just under the surface, too, with active volcanoes. Venus sounds like the ultimate convenience garbage dump to me. We would pollute it, what if we could live in it in the future, keep the toxic and other waste on Earth argument isn't sensible. Venus has usable resources. We need to make choices. We need to pick a dumping site in our star system and start dumping. I think in Jupiter. It took over 40k nuclear weapons in 1993 when Shoemaker Levi 9 hit, after all. One final thing. I will say that Fresnel lenses are one of the ultimate key tools for space exploration and forming bases on other objects. So obviously, a person could literally make a very small puddle on the outside of Europa with one out of a household big screen TV.